That same picture is what I saw on the TV when his biography was being said. That is my son. He is dead. I buried his body parts with my bare hands. You and your husband brought them to me, remember? Wait a minute, are you saying that Abiside Orok is a ghost? Edu asked. I can swear on their graves, on their father's grave. The mark of twins was given to them after their birth, that mark is behind his back. A black mark, to show that they were twins. If you do not see that sign on his back, I will go back to Abaya and never come back here anymore. The old woman said. Edu studied her openly and ran out of the house with the picture in her hand. She drove the car speedily, forgetting that Lena was in there. When she got to the government house, she ran into the bedroom. Lena and the security men ran after her. She didn't remember at that moment if Abiside had a mark on his back or not. She had seen him naked a lot of times, but it didn't occur to her that he had a mark on his back. She opened the door and when she saw Abiside, she felt terrified. What's happening to everyone? Abiside asked surprisingly. Removing Nigeria's constitution from his laps and placing it on the bed. Turn your back and remove your shirt. Edu ordered. Abiside giggled and removed his shirt. Turning around, Edu saw a mark on his back. He is a ghost, she yelled and ran out of the house. Everyone ran away. Lena backed and backed. Abiside wondered what was happening. He didn't know what to say, he was confused. His heart was pounding when he stepped into the board meeting auditorium, and he watched everyone vanish into the thin air. The urge to search for his wife was practically irresistible. A terrible weakness spread over him, and he closed his eyes in aching misery. The morning was quiet and deadly still at the government house. Abiside watched everyone run helter-skelter. The whole government house was calm and quiet, only the screechy sounds from the birds could be heard from afar. He stood at one corner of his room and wept bitterly. It was the first time he'd cried so bitterly. He wrote a letter and dropped it on the table. Packing a few of his personal belongings, he vanished. The town was hot for months. The disappearance of Abiside shocked everyone. It grieved Edu. She'd wept uncontrollably for nights, thinking about him with a picture of him placed to her heart. His mother, Mrs. Orok, wept too. But the captain was unusual. He was weak and sick. Nobody knew what was going on in his mind until he fainted and was taken to the hospital. High blood pressure. Dr. Ebong said, after he removed the stethoscope from his chest. A few government officials took Edu home that night. Everyone was afraid as they walked in twos into the government house. Mercy and Bessie held Edu's hands side by side and walked into her bedroom. Fear fell on them as they entered the room with so much boldness. I won't be sleeping here tonight, Edu said weakly. There is a letter for you, Your Excellency, Mercy said, as she picked the letter from the table and handed it to her. Edu's hands shook as she collected the letter and opened it immediately. My lovely wife, my heart is heavy as I write this to you. The world has abandoned me, and even you too would believe that a man whom you make love to, whom you kiss every morning and play with would be a ghost. If I were a ghost, I wouldn't exist. Edu read through each line of the letter countable times, tears running down her cheeks. Don't believe it, Your Excellency. This same thing happened to one woman in my village. Burn that letter. We will call a pastor to pray, Mercy said soothingly. Mercy is right, Edu. These things happen. It's rather unfortunate that it's happening to you, Bessie added. There was a soft knock on the door. Come in, Mercy said. Your Excellency, the Honorable Commissioners and the President of Itai State Pastors are here to see you. They said you sent for them, the Deputy Governor said. Edu appeared in the sitting room, covered with a black smock. Everyone in the meeting room stood as she entered. Sit, she ordered calmly. Your Excellency, Bishop Etukudo Basi is asking for your permission to pray around the government house with a few members of his church. One of the commissioners said. Edu nodded calmly. The speaker stood up after everyone was quiet. Your Excellency, Mrs. Edu Abeside Orok, we want to let you know that the government officials have decided to hand over the office of the governor to you. And while we wait for the governor to return, believing that the ghost story is a rumor, we will wait for 30 days for him to come back, and after 30 days, if he doesn't return, we will write to the president to give us the permission to make a burial in his honor. At least a graveside with a statue of him for his remembrance. The speaker said. Edu was silent for a long time. She didn't know what to say. She began to weep aloud. Few commissioners held her and took her away. Everyone went back home with a sad feeling. All through that night, she had cried and cried. She cuddled Lina and woke up in the middle of the night to remind herself that the love of her life was a ghost. She refused to dwell on that thought. She'd hoped that if he comes back, she won't see him as a ghost anymore. She won't care about what people might think of him. She will stay with him until the contract was over. She sighed every moment she stood by the window, watching the gate to see if Abeside was going to return. For 29 days she sat there, wishing he could just appear to her for the last time and tell her how much he'd missed her. She wanted to see his face, touch it and feel it. She wanted to tell him to his face that she'd fallen in love with him for real, and if she could change the hands of time, she wouldn't have left him when she discovered that he was a ghost. She would have vanished to forever land with him. Several times, she reached out to the window. And in her sleep, she called his name. And on the 30th day, she fell on the stairs. On her way back to the sitting room, her maids held her and yelled aloud, alarming the security men. One army officer carried her immediately and rushed her to the private clinic. In a few minutes the governor's personal doctor, Dr. Abbott, arrived. After running a few urgent tests on her, he stared at her pitifully for long moments. Edu stared down at Dr. Abbott until the doctor's words sputtered into silence and the pains she felt in her head stopped. Next, her gaze went to her father. The fierce light of battle faded more slowly from those canny, tired, teary eyes. Dr. Ebong says you're pregnant, Idiuwam. Her father said with emotions in his tone. I am surprised that a ghost would get a human being pregnant. He chuckled. Idiu's expression held regret, disappointment and acceptance. Dr. Ebong stared vacantly, rubbing his chin as if he were a talisman. Only Bessie offered a wink, a smile and a thumbs up of encouragement. If he is not a ghost, then why has he suddenly vanished in the midst of all this? Why? She asked almost in tears. Your Excellency, I have been a medical doctor and a therapist for 30 years. And I doubt this ghost rumor about the governor. If indeed he is a ghost, I would have seen some traits. He won't get you pregnant. If ghosts really exist, they shouldn't be seen. You don't believe in ghosts? All these Makara people that went to America to study don't know anything about ghosts. These things happen. Bessie said. Only in Nollywood movies. Dr. Ebong retorted ironically. Strongly as I recall, my grandmother appeared to me few days after her death. I saw her, we even ate banana porridge together. She told me stories and when she heard my mother's footsteps she disappeared. She told me she was going to come back. Bessie said shrilly. Did she come back? Idiu's father asked. Bessie shook her head. No. But she visited in my dreams. Dr. Ebong laughed. Bessie joined him in laughing too. We should find the governor as soon as possible. Idiu's father said in the midst of the loud laugh, suddenly causing an abrupt pause. The old man rose slowly, walked to the humidor and removed a cigar. I will get myself a lighter. No smoking allowed here, father. Edu said. Then why do we have a humidor filled with cigars? He asked. Just for fancy. Edu said quietly. In a governor's private lodge. He asked, stared at her for a few seconds, sighed and walked out of the room. Edu held her stomach and stared at it. We didn't want a baby now. Abuside and I never wanted a baby so soon. She murmured to herself. I will keep it in memory of him. I hope the baby looks just like him. Bessie. She called out, turning to Bessie. Do you think Abuside would come back? In your dreams? The state gave him 30 days to return. Have you seen him? Bessie asked, some of her natural arrogance returning. So, if truly he is a ghost, my baby will be what? Dr. Ebong immediately turned to her, closing his laptop. He said, ghost baby. Medical terms say so. Bessie asked, looking amazed. Dr. Ebong laughed out loud. Of course not. Edu noticed that Dr. Ebong didn't take Abuside's demise seriously. She'd felt that it was his usual way of life. Dr. Ebong might say something very serious in a mild way. She suddenly began to cry again. Bessie hugged her while she kept crying. Dr. Ebong spent the whole night simply staring out of the window at the empty darkness. 2 months had passed, and Abuside's shadow was not seen, not even from afar as Edu had wished. The deputy governor had countered Edu's inability to rule the state. She has never been a politician, she said bitterly. But Edu didn't respond. She knew that there were going to be obstacles, and even if Abuside wasn't there to tell her what to do, she knew he would have wanted her to replace him. At the meeting with the statesmen, it was agreed that a burial was going to be done with or without Abuside's body. Edu had wanted to object to it, but she did in her heart. She admitted reluctantly. From afar, she pictured him running a hand through her hair and rolling his hands on her stomach. It's going to be a boy, he said. She gripped him more tightly, not wanting to let him go. Lina startled her by leaping under her chair, in between her legs, and uttering a low growl as she stared out the window. Her tail swished angrily. The governor's wife's dog is so beautiful, the commissioner for women affairs said sweetly from afar. She is now the governor is no more, the secretary retorted. Edu's heart trembled when she heard the secretary's words. She became weak, frustrated, bitter and heartbroken. Take me to my room, she said to Mercy. In 2 days' time, a burial will be conducted for Abuside, a coffin will be brought and all she would see in that coffin will be the imaginary picture of him sleeping by her side. In the middle of the night, she walked into the darkness with Lina. Walking around the gardens, she'd waited patiently for Lina to bark, so that she would be alerted that he was there. She would wait there for him to appear to her and take her away with him. Her life was about to explode. She let out a squawk of disgruntled protest as Lina moved her body around her legs, disturbing her thoughts. Edu looked stylish as she walked into the meeting room. The statesman stood until she got to her seat and settled on it. After the opening prayer by the deputy governor, they all sat quietly, waiting for her to say something. There won't be any burial for my husband, until his body is found, she said calmly but boldly, not looking at anybody. She elapsed into silence again, waiting for the scapegoat to counter her words, so that she would walk him or her out. The thought of burying Abuside in mind, in an empty coffin left her cold and deflated. Normal office duties resumed today. We will all wait for the governor to return and take over from where we shall stop, Edu said. After the meeting for that day, rumors went around that she was mentally ill. Countless times, Mercy had seen her at midnight walking into the big field with Lina alone, and not even a torchlight in her hand. On this particular evening, she had seen him. She sat on that field and he sat by her in the unlighted big field that had grasshoppers in them, watching the dark outlines of trees. She found that her hand slipped quite naturally to his, then Lina suddenly became calm. She'd expected her to bark, but she didn't. It was late, and everyone had gone to bed. And Abuside, in the strange, dim quiet night held her hands tight, and took it to his chest. He still stroked her fingers and said nothing. When the silence began to make her uncomfortable, she broke it. Where have you been? His hand tightened around her knuckles. Because I have been worried. I am sorry. He shrugged and turned his head away. When she looked at him again, she held his face with her two hands. Talk to me. She yelled. So you do have dreams? Dr. Ebong's voice came in. She opened her eyes, and when she saw that she was on the hospital bed, she widened her eyes. What happened to me? She asked. You passed out at the field a moment ago. Mercy replied in a shaky tone. Your Excellency, we need to take you somewhere. Where you could have peace of mind with your cameras and forget about the office for now. Dr. Ebong said. There will be no peace of mind as long as Abisai doesn't exist anymore. She said bitterly. If she leaves, who will rule the state? People are already complaining that we don't have a governor. I saw it on The Guardian today. Mercy said. You believe everything you read on papers? Or the gossip local papers? Dr. Ebong gave a loud sigh. We have the deputy governor. She will take charge until she returns. She needs a vacation. For a fleeting moment, they stayed like that. Staring at Edu, and checking if her temperature was high or low. Where am I going? Edu asked madly. America more. You will be accompanied by me. Dr. Ebong said. Why you? No please. I don't want people to think we've got something to do in secret. Itai people talk like mad people. I am your personal doctor. You need me constantly by your side now. Well, even if you have to come. Bessie will join me. She turns to Mercy. Get Lena and my cameras ready. Get my sweaters and stockings ready too. America was the perfect place for Edu. She took pictures of all the beautiful things she set her eyes on, until they got to a large beautiful mansion in New York. Where is this place? I thought we were supposed to lodge in a hotel. We can't lodge in a hotel when Abisai has a house in New York. Dr. Ebong said. He never told me that. Well, he just got it. He said. Edu turned to him and said. This would have been a surprise. Maybe he just got it before his disappearance. I'm sure he wanted to surprise me. She said softly and confidently as she alighted from the car. Bessie was quiet all the while with Lena in her hands. She was admiring everything she saw with her eyes. Bessie got to the door first. She waited for Ebong and the driver to remove everything from the car so that she could have a view of what the inside of the house looked like. The journey would have been another honeymoon for her and her husband, but Edu wanted just her. Someone was behind the door, trying to open it. Edu wondered who it was. Dr. Ebong told them that it was a vacation house that Abisai built, which meant nobody was there. Lena suddenly began to bark as the door opened. Bessie's heart exploded as she saw Abisai. He was standing right before her in a pair of jeans and a blue sweater. The blood of Jesus. Holy Ghost fire. I rebuke you in Jesus' name. Abisai stared at her like she was insane. But Edu stared at Abisai like she just found something that she'd lost. She picked sand on the ground and threw it at him. Dr. Ebong and Abisai laughed a deep laugh as the two women stared at Abisai like he had just come out from a TV. Abisai. She called out his name with forced vivacity. Maybe the storytellers were wrong. If Abisai wasn't a ghost, then ghosts don't exist. Edu thought as she hugged him so tight to herself. A drop of tear fell from his eyes when his tummy pressed hers. He held her hands and led the way into the sitting room, while Bessie watched them, looking bewildered. Edu was surprised when she saw the taxi driver seated on the couch. The taxi driver smiled at her and stood to his feet when she walked in. Her parents-in-laws and the old woman Ugomo's presence didn't shock her like the taxi driver. She wondered what was really happening. This is a family meeting, my love. Abisai said and settled on the couch. While Edu stood there, confused and mute. Mom and Dad have a lot to say to us. But I wanted you to be here first before they begin. Bessie and Dr. Ebong walked past them. Dr. Ebong led Bessie to the room upstairs while he went to his, leaving Abeside and his family to have their meeting in private. Mrs. Orak's eyes were wet and reddish. It was obvious that she had been crying all along, before Edu's arrival. Edu walked gently and settled on Abeside's legs, while he held her tight to himself. "Sorry everyone. I didn't greet, I am just short of words," Edu said. "Greetings everyone," she added mildly. Mrs. Orak began to sob. She stood and knelt in the middle of the sitting room. The captain's face fell when he saw that his wife was about to tell the whole truth. "Abeside." She called out his name softly. "Ugoma and I met during the war, way back in Abaya. You and your brother were still young then. At that time, my husband and I were badly in need of children. Then during the war, I was still a practicing young nurse, treating children and women. You and your brother were brought to me that night. The other soldiers said you two had not eaten for days, you were about to be captured, but my husband saved you and your brother. I loved you two the very moment you were brought into that private ward. I didn't know who your parents were, I thought they died. I convinced my husband that we should leave Abaya with the two of you. He reluctantly agreed." She turned quietly to the taxi driver. "Mrs. Murphy said she was going to expose us to the villagers if we didn't give her one son. She was a widow, whose husband had died during the war. I handed you to her. I don't know what name she gave you." "Utaibaima," the taxi driver said boldly. "I handed you to her with a battered heart. She was the one who gave us the idea of lying to Ugoma that she'd lost the two of you. We took the remains of already dead children who had died in the hospital and gave it to her. She couldn't even look at the body parts, but she'd wept bitterly. And I will never forget the sound of her voice when she saw the bones of the dead boys we'd given to her. She began to cry. The captain cried too." Abeside looked directly at her once more. "My husband and I eloped with our new son, and we called him Abeside. My heart melted and I loved him the most when he called me mommy." She turned to Abeside. "When our family doctor Edet told me that I was never going to have a child again, I had to devote my whole life in loving you. Just like I would have loved my own child." Panic filled Abeside as he stared at Mrs. Orak, whom he thought was his mother. He'd been watching Ugoma for a very long time, and wondered if he had been the governor under her parenthood. "Mrs. Murphy and I never talked or saw each other again till her death. I was told by a retired colleague of mine that she died of cancer," Mrs. Orak said. "She told me everything before she took her last breath," Utaibayame said. "She told me that I had a twin brother. She told me about you people. I had to find my mother and tell her of the governor." "So you knew me all this while?" Abeside asked. Utaibayama nodded. "Then why did you not come to me a long time before now? You were always filled with bodyguards and security men. I had come to your office countless times, but they only called me a beggar and pushed me off the walls," Utaibayame said. "When I saw you alone at the airport this last time, I made up my mind to tell you who you truly are." The captain and the old woman, Ugoma, lacked words to say. Ugoma had wanted to talk about her daughter, Abeside, and Utaibayame's sister. But it wasn't the right time to talk about her just yet. And on that night, Abeside sat on the bed and watched Edu trying to zip down her dress. He walked to her hastily and helped pull the zip down. She suppressed a willful smile as she pulled her gown down to her legs. "Dr. Ebong said we're having a baby," Abeside said. "Yes. I know it wasn't in the contract, I will handle it my way," she faltered. He wouldn't let her complete the sentence. He kissed her helplessly. Her lips tasted like apples on a fresh spring morning. His lips curved just the tiniest bit. Edu looked frantically at him. She wondered in her heart if she was really in his arms. She had never known real fear until the time he'd disappeared. And even when she believed that he was a ghost, she'd wished that she too was a ghost. She loved him with everything in her. And he couldn't stop kissing her stomach down to her breast and then her lips. Nothing mattered at that moment for Abeside, not even the state or his biological mother Ugoma, whom he had not seen for years. All he wanted was to be married for real to Edu. "We will marry in court before we go back to Nigeria," he said softly. It wasn't in the contract that. Abeside covered her mouth with his hands and whispered, "Fuck the contract. I called my lawyer to cancel it before I left for here. You and I are legally married." The sound of his voice calmed her, so he kept talking to her softly. "That contract was fake. I wanted you to fall in love with me." She looked at him as if she didn't understand what he was saying. "I was in love with you before the contract." She buried her face against his neck. "Me too. I just wanted to make things work out my own way," he retorted. Abeside gathered her close, holding her against his chest. She was trying hard to overcome the ghost story fear, and the things he said chilled her heart. Abeside spoke calmly to her, things she wanted to hear about the two of them and the baby. Guilt hung over her. She wouldn't have run away from him or even made him leave, she would have stayed. She couldn't imagine how he felt. Being alone in the U.S. might have given him so many painful emotions. It scared her that he was tagged a ghost. Usually, he was strong, competent and so capable. He'd always been bigger than life to her. His tall, masculine body had always seemed invulnerable. She trusted him, admired him, loved him with all her heart. She forced herself to stop thinking and just concentrate at the moment. "You didn't tell me that you loved me," Abeside said. "But you knew I did. I only felt it. When I made love to you, the passion and the bond was so strong. I almost went crazy when I stayed here without you," he said. "My brother liked you too," he added. She quickly looked at him and gave a soft smile. "He told you that?" Abeside nodded softly. "I will make him my personal assistant when we get back home. I need him closer now. We spent most of our time in separate homes." "Good. And your mother?" she asked. "I don't know yet. Maybe we will buy her a house in town." He was mute for a moment, then he sighed and said, "Everything happened for a reason. Maybe I wouldn't have been governor if I wasn't taken by my father, the captain." He stared at her for a long moment, then added, "He is my father. I am what I am today because of him." He rose to his feet, ran his hand through his hair. "We have a sister. She was our only sister." That was the last thing she had expected him to say. "You will get to see her when we get back home." He noticed that her gown was too loose at the waist. She had lost weight despite the pregnancy, and it worried him. "You thought of me too much. You will have to regain your health before we go back home," he said soothingly. Her heart melted at his sight. He was cuter than the time she'd last seen him. He was now looking more mature, more solidly male and even more handsome. The lines in his face added character. He gently lowered himself down to the bed, and laid right beside her. She touched his face, and he closed his eyes. She offered him her lips, and she took the offer. "I almost lost my mind when I remembered this," he said sensually and kissed her more. She was making him crazy, thinking about things that never mattered to him before. But the thought of having his child rocked his world to the core. His gaze slid downward, he began to pull down her clothes gently. As he rode her gently, the sweet throb of anticipation began within him. He was marrying her again, but at the registry in America. And his surprise gift for her when they get back to Nigeria will be the world-class photography school he had built for her with billions of naira. He would do anything to make his woman happy. Abeside sniffed the air again. Vanilla. Without raising his head, he opened his eyes. He was on the bed and she was lying next to him. He looked at her across the hills and valleys of white cotton sheets. He rubbed his thumb across her back, savored the softness of her skin against his. He loved to touch her just that way. She was like steel, her skin as soft as angels. But it was the steel that fascinated him. On that morning they were to get married, the weather was quite unfriendly. Edu had never felt such icy cold run down her spines in her entire life. She managed to wear a sweater on her white satin dress, yet, still shivering. "You don't need a sweater on that dress," Bessie said. Edu frowned and followed her gaze. "I am cold. I could freeze to death if I don't wear a sweater or have something to cover up," Edu said softly as she carried her clutch purse and stared at it for a while. "Abuside always knows my kind of thing. I wouldn't have gone for something else," she muttered. "I am happy for you. Thanks to God I came with my camera. I am going to take pictures of every moment of you and the governor." It was a registry marriage. Edu had wished her father was right there. She smiled brightly when her gaze met Abuside. Her heart shuddered to a stop as Abuside took her hands. It was the best moment in her life. It wasn't a contract marriage anymore. She was marrying him for real, and there was something about this day that she couldn't really explain. After they'd made vows, Mrs. O'Rourke made different delicacies for 7 of them. They all ate and drank to their full excitedly in the midst of conversations that stirred up laughter. They all arrived in Itai State in the early hours of Monday. Reporters and journalists took pictures of them alighting from the plane. Everyone wondered what was happening. Was the governor no more a ghost? The next day, headlines of newspapers said, "Ghost husband returns back to rule state from family vacation." Abuside held his first meeting with his statesmen immediately he got back to office. Everyone stood and applauded as he walked into the board meeting room, except the deputy governor, who had an obvious frown on her face. "There are enough wild rumors going around town right now that you're not a real Itai son. You're not the son of the soil," she said boldly. Everyone became quiet immediately. "Which constitution says that woman?" Barrister Esicott asked rudely, his voice echoed in the large auditorium. Their gazes locked sternly. With a heavy heart, Abuside said boldly, "Get her out of this place." His bodyguards walked hastily toward her, and before they got to where she sat, she said bitterly, "I will be governor. I will let my people know that you don't have our blood in you." They held her firmly and dragged her out. "Open your eyes, a Biafran can't rule over us. He has Igbo blood in him." Her voice was now heard from a distance, and then it wasn't heard anymore. "Welcome, Your Excellency." Everyone chorused and gave a loud round of applause. Abuside ruled Itai well despite the rumor that he wasn't a true son. He was loved by the majority. After he made his brother his personal assistant, he made his campaign manager his new deputy governor. The people talked about nepotism, but Abuside didn't mind. A frisson of fear slithered up Idiu's spine when she woke up. Something was very wrong. She felt something on her nose but couldn't tell what it was. It was an oxygen tube. She stared at the faces of everyone that stood to face her. She didn't understand what was happening. The last she could remember was that she was addressing the black women when she felt something fall on her. And then wild screams. It was the building collapse. "She is awake. Her Excellency is awake." A voice came in. It was her sister Bessie. She was holding a baby in her hands. It was Idiu's 9-month-old daughter Dora. She tried to grasp, lifting her head. But someone held her back. It didn't occur to her who it was, but when she looked at him clearly, she noticed that it was her husband Abuside. She'd loved him all over again. "Welcome back, my love. The best 45th birthday gift you've given me is coming back to consciousness." "Where are we?" she asked softly. "We are at Great Ormond Street Hospital in London." "How long have I been here?" she asked, her face expressionless. 3 months. She gasped. Abuside squeezed her hands reassuringly. "By next month, I will be handing over to someone else. We have come this far as the youngest governor and first lady. The people of Akwa Ibom State celebrate you. It's been 8 good solid years." Abiside said. Eddie wondered what he meant. She gazed up in surprise and looked around the room. A doctor rushed into the ward and pulled the oxygen tube off her nose. Dr. Mallory was written on her shirt pocket. She pulled out the tube and placed the stethoscope on her chest for a few moments. Is she okay, doctor? Abiside asked. He held her hands again. It bathed her body as the sensual rhythm of his words stirred the torrent of suppressed desire.